believe that they will be worse than the military that eventually had to give up. They cannot be worse or stronger than the British Empire at its glory that left Nigerians to govern themselves. These people in National Assembly are brothers and sisters like you and me. They are ordinary people who are there only by virtue of elections, and I don't think that they want us to burn the house down before they do the right thing. So we do not contemplate that they are going to joke with the people. We are ready with them. I can tell you one thing surely. This election will not hold based on bad laws. This election will hold only on good laws. If we don't settle the issue of Electoral Act, we are not taking 1 inch forward. We all meet here now. We have joint issues. That is it. And we are not a nation. I don't think President Tinubu wants United Nations mandate to come and conduct election in Nigeria. But if they don't give us good laws, they have disqualified themselves from conducting the election, because there is an element of public trust in an election, that the government of the day is the one to supervise the election, and which means at that point they are acting as statesmen, not as partisans anymore. And if they lose that credibility, then the election will not hold, their tenure will expire, and will be under UN mandate.
Thank you very much.
From INEC itself proposed transmission. In the INEC guidelines, it is transmission. The role of the National Assembly is not to come and teach us brighter grammar book 1. Their job is to give statutory authority, because I have argued in front of Supreme Court on many occasions, and they always ask that question. This thing you are complaining about, INEC, is it contained in the Electoral Act? If it is not contained in the Electoral Act, and you are only complaining that INEC violated its own guidelines, that is not binding. That is the reason why INEC even agree with us to escalate it to the National Assembly to make it compulsory under the law. So the language is transmission. And if they are looking for references, they should go to the Constitution. Even the National Assembly bill has to be transmitted to the President from National Assembly for signature. Why did the Constitution not say the bill should be transferred to the President? So the language transmission or transmit has judicial meaning for those who study jurisprudence. In the writing of laws, you use words that already have meaning known to the court. That is why you say pay a check. You don't say bring cash on the check. You use language that the court already knows. So if the National Assembly wants to do their duty and they are not doing a dirty job, they are not playing monkey game, risking the continuity of this republic, if they just want to do what is right, they don't need to search for words. The words are already in the bill given to them. Thank you.
We will not waste any more time. I will go ahead to read the text of the press conference, and thereafter we will spare a few minutes if you have questions that you want to ask. This is a text of a World Press Conference addressed by Lagos. MCE, that's the Movement for Credible Election, endorses the popular demand by Nigerians for critical and mandatory electoral and political reforms for credible election in 2027. To establish advocacy and mobilization structures in the 36 states of the Federation ahead of the 2027 general elections, to endorse nationwide civic actions and protest against the National Assembly over the stalled and weakened electoral reforms. Preamble. The Movement for Credible Elections, MCE, inaugurated at the National Summit on Electoral Reform held on the 11th of November 2025 in Abuja, is deeply concerned about Nigeria's growing political fragility. This fragility is driven largely by citizens' declining trust in the credibility of elections and the repeated failure of the electoral system to reflect the true will of voters. Across successive electoral circles, Nigerians have witnessed the same troubling patterns. These include electoral violence, voter suppression, vote buying, weak logistics, selective deployment of technology, poor enforcement of electoral laws, manipulation during collation, and the open circumvention of voters' choices. These problems are no longer isolated incidents. They have become systemic, and without decisive constitutional/electoral reforms, the credibility of the 2027 general election is seriously at risk. The consequences will be deeper public disillusionment, growing public resentment, and further erosion of democratic legitimacy, opening doors to political instability. It is for this reason that the MCE, a national coalition of civic groups and citizens, formally calls on the leadership of the National Assembly, both Senate and the House of Representatives, to prioritize far-reaching non-negotiable reforms in the ongoing harmonization of electoral reform bills ahead of the 2027 elections. Key areas of concern which require electoral reforms for the 2027 elections. 1. Strengthening the Electoral Act of 2022. Civic groups are united in calling for targeted amendments to the Electoral Act of 2022 to close loopholes that weaken transparency and accountability. In particular, provisions dealing with accreditation, result collation, transmission, and declaration of results must be clarified and strengthened to remove discretion that enables abuse. The current ambiguity in sections dealing with results management has been exploited to justify manual interference after polling unit results are known. 2. Mandatory electronic transmission of results. The most contentious issue remains the refusal of the National Assembly to make electronic transmission of results mandatory. MCE demands the amendment of the Electoral Act 2022, especially the provisions relating to collation and transmission of results, to explicitly require real-time electronic transmission of polling unit results to the INEC Result View Portal, IREV. This transmission must be mandatory, immediate, and non-negotiable. The removal or dilution of this provision is seen by civic group as a deliberate attempt to the public will. 3. Strict sanctions for electoral offenses. Sections of the Electoral Act dealing with electoral offenses must be strengthened to impose clear, deterrent penalties for vote buying, voters intimidation, assault on election personnel, destruction of election materials, and falsification of results. Beyond penalties on paper, the law must create enforceable mechanisms that ensure investigation and prosecution, including coordination with security agencies and the judiciary. 4. Strengthening INEC's institutional independence. MCE demands amendments to the Electoral Act and relevant constitutional provisions to guarantee INEC's operational independence. This includes timely release of funds, statutory protection for INEC staff, and safeguards against political interference in logistics, recruitment, and deployment of personnel. Independence must go beyond theory and be reflected in daily operations. 5. independent audit of electoral technology. The law must mandate a full and independent audit of INEC's technological infrastructure, including Vows, IRAB, data storage systems, cybersecurity architecture, and backup mechanisms. Such audits should be conducted by credible independent experts and concluded well ahead of the 2027 elections to prevent last-minute excuses and system failures. 6. Inclusive electoral participation. MCE calls for reforms that expand participation for groups historically excluded from governance. This includes legislative measures to promote the participation of youth, women, persons with disability, to allow diaspora voting and early voting for security personnel, health workers, and other essential service providers on election day. 7. Enforcement of internal party democracy. Amendments to Section 84 of the Electoral Act must go beyond procedural compliance and compel political parties to conduct transparent primaries, respect their constitutions, and comply with party finance regulations. Sanctions for violations must be clear and enforced without selective application. 8. Resolution of election petitions before swearing in. The Electoral Act and relevant constitutional provisions must be amended to ensure that all election petitions are concluded before winners are sworn into office, allowing disputed mandates to be exercised while cases drag on undermines justice, and the work must be legally required to complete all verification and validation processes, including reconciliation of electronically transmitted results with polling unit records before declaring final outcome. Premature declarations have been a major source of post-election conflict. 10. Ending pre-election judicial interference. The law must clearly limit the issuance of court orders that disrupt the electoral process before voting takes place. While access to justice remains important, judicial interventions that derail election preparations or alter timelines at the last minute have repeatedly undermined credibility. 11. Addressing political defections. MCE aligns with the popular demand to amend Section 68 and Section 109 of the Constitution to make defections by elected officials grounds for automatic loss of office, followed by fresh elections without tenure extension. The current abuse of defections has distorted voter mandates and weakened party accountability. 12. Democratic appointment of INEC leadership. Civic groups demand reforms to the constitutional provision governing the appointment of INEC chairman and national commissioners. Appointments should follow a transparent, merit-based, and participatory process, including public advertisement of vacancies screened by an independent committee drawn from professional and civic bodies, public interviews, and final confirmation by the National Assembly after open hearings as proposed by the Justice Ways report. This is essential to restore confidence in INEC's neutrality. Conclusion. As the vanguard of collective civic action for credible elections in 2027, MCE calls on partners, allies, and citizens to participate in the Occupy National Assembly protest scheduled for today, Monday, the 9th of February 2026. This mobilization is a peaceful defense of the popular will and the clear rejection of any attempt to return Nigeria to manual manipulation and back-home result fabrication. Finally, the MC affirms that electronic transmission must be completed by verifiable safeguards, must be complemented by verifiable safeguards that allow results transmitted electronically to be cross-checked with polling unit records. The introduction of voter verification paper audit trail as practiced in India should be explored. Democracy dies when votes are stolen. It is time to end electoral rigging in Nigeria. This position is endorsed by the following conveners and leaders of the steering council of the Movement for Credible Election as listed below. The list is with you, and it's for you to look at it, and like Veteran Wale Okumi indicated, some of the members of these are right now in Abuja coordinating the Occupy National Assembly protest, and some of them are online on Zoom from different locations that they may have an opportunity to see our word or two. So it's for you now to hand over the mic to Comrade Wale.
Earlier, this guy has been addressed by